So a couple days ago, Bitcoin broke the $50,000 mark. And in comparison, when I posted my first Bitcoin video around a month ago, the price was at around $33,000. And since then, there's been the rise of Dogecoin, the GameStop crisis, the introduction of NFTs, and so much more. I would say that it's been a pretty eventful month for the financial industry. And probably the most important catalyst to this price jump of Bitcoin was Elon Musk announcing that they would put 1.5 billion of their cash that they have on hand into Bitcoin. That in itself causing a jump in price, and also all the hype that came along with it. And within these past couple days, the price has dropped down a bit to around $48,200 as of this recording. But because there's been so much hype around Bitcoin lately, the term blockchain and blockchain technology has been thrown around all over the place, saying that it's going to become the future of finance because of all the security that comes along with it. But to the average person like you and me, we might have no idea what this blockchain technology means, along with all the implications it might bring. Are the most important characteristics of blockchain, and I want to explain them in this video. So if any of that interests you, let's get started. And if you're not familiar with cryptocurrencies whatsoever, you might confuse Bitcoin with blockchain. So I want to clarify first that blockchain is not a cryptocurrency. And want to know the general idea of how it works? I created a video a while back, so check it out if you're interested. But anyways, these Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies transactions, they run on a public ledger. And the ledger is essentially another word for the blockchain. So imagine that a block is a page of transactions within a ledger. And once you finish writing all the transactions, you move on to the next page or the next block. And each time a block is completed, it generates a unique code, which is then connected to the next block. So this is where the term blockchain comes from, because since they're all accessible to the public, anyone can access this ledger and look at all the transactions that were completed in it. And the reason why blockchain is such a big deal is because no one owns it. So we don't need a specific organization to verify all the transactions within a ledger. Everyone has access to it, so they can verify it. But now let's jump into 5 of the most important characteristics of the blockchain, and that'll also explain how it works. And the first thing I want to go over is something called cryptographic hash, or hash for short. Transforms all the data that's put into the blockchain into a random string of characters. So each time a block of transactions is verified, this unique hash of random characters appears to verify that it's authentic. And what's so special about this is that it's a one-way conversion. So you can use the data that was input into the block and get a hash code out of it, but you can't look at a hash code and try to hack your way to track back into the transactions that were already verified. So technically, it's a one-way street. You can only use the input to get the hash, use the hash to get the input. And this is why blockchain is said to be essentially unhackable, and why everyone says blockchain is the future of security. But now let's talk about the second characteristic of blockchain, which is the immutable ledger, or in other words, it's a ledger that can't be changed. So picture 3 blocks in a blockchain. And the reason why this technology is so secure is that the hash from the first block that's solved is integrated into the second hash. Once that block is solved, it produces the second hash, which is then integrated into the third hash, and so on. So if a hacker tried to modify the system, they might try to modify one of the transactions within the first block, but then the hash from that first block will affect the hash in the second block because it's already integrated into it. And then the second hash from the second block will change, which will then affect the hash in the third block and show up as an error. And this is why we say it's essentially impossible for hackers to hack the blockchain and take all our cryptocurrency, because if they wanted to, they would essentially need to change the entire blockchain network. And as cryptocurrencies become more popular, it increases the network, which also makes it for hackers to try to hack it. The only way that they could do it, all the characters within the hash until they found the right combination, which technically isn't impossible, but because of how many characters are within the hash and how many possible variations there are to it, if they wanted to, it would take years to solve. And it is possible, but it would require something called quantum computing, which is technology that's years ahead of where we are. And even then, when we reach that level, there's already hashing methods that are quantum resistant. Now you may be thinking that all this hash talk is something that was only recently created and something we only recently started to use within the blockchain. But surprisingly, the use of hashing has been around for a while. And the most common use is from how we use passwords. So when you create a password for your email account, for example, you write this string of characters that is usually memorable or something that you know you'll remember later on, and type it into the text box. Don't see what you're typing, write it down somewhere and refer to it later to verify. If that was the case, they would be compromising your privacy. Instead, they use the hashing function. So when you type out your password, it creates a specific random string of characters. So the next time you go to log into your email account and type in your password, matches with the hash that was generated before, and if it matches, it lets you into your account. And to me, I found this quite interesting because I never really thought of how passwords work before. So let's jump back into the third characteristic of blockchain, and that is the peer-to-peer network. And like I mentioned before, because everyone has access to the blockchain, there's no specific organization that manages it. Everyone can see and verify that it's valid, but in order for these blocks to be connected, the users need to agree that all the transactions on a specific block are accurate. And there's two ways in which users decide on whether or not, and that is the proof of work method. And I found these two methods to be a bit confusing, so I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. So let's start with proof of work. And this method came to be back in the day when email spam used to be a really big issue. This was when the internet was first created and there wasn't a lot of protocols, so this allowed spammers to market as much as they wanted to as many people as they wanted without any restrictions. They hoped that someone would sign up to their ads, type in some of their personal information, which they could then steal and use for their own purposes. So they came up with a method that would use the computer and make it do some work in order to send a message. And if they were just sending one email, this wouldn't be a problem. But as a spammer, your goal is to send as many emails as possible to as many people and essentially throw stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Then, attempting to send 1,000 emails at a time would require a significant amount of computational power. And this is where proof of work came in. So in this system, the computer would be required to solve a problem that it solved it. And then another computer is in charge of verifying that the answer is correct, and then allows that previous computer to complete the action. So when they were trying to limit spam, they set certain protocols that the computers had to go through. And the emails that actually made it through showed that the sender actually put in some effort to try and get that message to them. So the hash that I mentioned before is the result of the proof of work process. Each time a block of transactions is verified, the computer spits out that hash as proof that all the transactions within that block are indeed valid. And this is the most simplified way. There's still a lot more that I didn't cover. Comment down below if this is something that you want me to go more in depth. But now let's talk about the proof of stake method. And this can be thought of as an easier way out compared to proof of work. Instead of using all that computing power, the user who wants to create a new block. So if you want to use this method, and then stake it, in the case that then the crypto that you staked would be taken away from you as part of the contract. The way I'm explaining it now is extremely stripped down. So once these users validate that the block meets their requirements using whichever method of proof, along with validating all the transactions within the blocks. And finally, the fifth and probably the most popular characteristic about blockchain, and that is the mining process. And how it's mined, but you've probably heard of these people who have rooms and rooms of supercomputers that are solving complex problems, mining for Bitcoin. And I've touched on most of this in the previous section, or essentially what miners do when they mine for Bitcoin. Except, unlike a few computers in the past when they were trying to fend off email spammers, miners nowadays have rooms and rooms of supercomputers solving complex problems and using cryptographic hashing. Get cryptocurrency or Bitcoin as a reward. But yeah, Those were the 5 characteristics of the blockchain technology that I wanted to go over. The crypto space has been around for a while, and it has only become recently popular with the general public. And that's why so many people are going out, doing their research to try and figure out how it works. And I've just recently learned about the general idea of how all this works, and I'm also intrigued by the idea of how this is going to change the way we live in the future. But I plan to make a lot more videos about this as I learn more about this topic. And I know that a lot of times this information can be overwhelming, so I'm going to do my best to try and explain it in the easiest way possible. But as always, if you made it to the end, you clearly didn't find me too boring, so go ahead and click the subscribe button down below. I post at least one video every week, and I would really appreciate it if you tuned in. But that's been it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.